course versus long course or whatever. So for you guys that are mostly doing sprints, Olympic would be the one where you'd start at least having something in one of the transitions, because I know you guys are probably even in Olympic distance are probably pretty fast, that you might only need it in one transition. But as you get into 70.3s and above, then you have to kind of worry about fueling the whole time. Okay, so if you want specific questions answered on that, go ahead. Another pitfall: too much protein, too much fiber, too much fat. The day before, even 2 days before, depending on your own individual metabolism. So I do a lot of like specific carb loading plans that take a whole week leading up to a race. Even for short course, because you really want to, like you said, wake up with the most optimal fuel, most energy, feeling your best the day of your race. So 2 nights before is probably the most important meal for any race. The night before, just tradition. That whole carbo loading, big spaghetti pasta dinner thing came from tradition. Race directors really want to have another money making.
It's cheap.
Yeah, and that's how you can serve a lot of people. Do you think pasta the night before does anything for you? All it does is make you feel constipated the next day. So 2 nights before is the best time to have like a white pasta, and that's the one time the dietitian will tell you white's good. Because you don't want too much of the fiber, so you can do plain white. I wouldn't even have any protein with it. You don't need any fat. You don't put lots of sauce or anything on, just a white pasta, marinara sauce. That's it. Have some bread with that, fruit for dessert. And then the next day, you can start cutting back on the fiber. So let's say you have fruit and salad and veggies for dinner. You can start cutting back on the fiber. You could just go with plain things like plain potato, white rice, white bread, candy, not chocolate candy, gummy bears and jelly beans. So the day before is when you start getting into the pure carbs and the less fibrous carbs. Fat, fiber and protein take a lot longer to digest. Not only that, they're not going towards any fuel source, so you don't need to take up room in those calories, and they're not going towards fuel. Now there is some controversial about how much protein should I have beforehand, because protein does start the rebuild and recovery. Okay, so you know, again, Accelerate was the first one, I think, that came out with a product that is a during with protein in it. You don't need that protein. Your rebuild and recover will come from your recovery meal. That protein is not typically going towards fuel. So again, it's a marketing edge. Very smart, because people believe anything.
My understanding was that product was based on a flawed study, where they studied a pure carbohydrate group and a carbohydrate with protein group. The problem was the carbohydrate with protein group actually had more calories. Yeah. So in further studying that, they said, well, it's because they were given more calories, not because they got the protein.
And a lot of research, again, you know, looking at research, you've got to come from a very scientific point of view. A lot of research you can find loopholes. So, I mean, I definitely believe that research is somewhat flawed. You'll get different controversial dietitians will tell you, yes, you do need the protein during, but in my opinion, all that protein is doing is taking up extra metabolic effort.
What about for a ultra endurance athlete that's doing the same?
If they're doing back to back to back and they're having breaks in between, yes, you can do, because you are catabolic, so protein is fine. But not a lot, because you don't want that protein to take a toll on your digestion. So if it's taking a toll on your digestion, what's going to happen is you're going to have GI distress. But to start the rebuild and recovery usually only happens once you're at rest anyway. So back-to-back workouts, if you're having breaks in between, that would be a good time to have a little bit of protein. But if you're going consistently, you're burning fuel all the time anyway. You don't need the rebuild to start until you're done. So of course that makes your recovery meal very important when you're training. So recovery. Some of you tell me some of your what do you do on training? Anybody want to tell me what their recovery meals are? Don't be shy.
Hey, let's start with you.
What do I do for recovery?
Yeah, you should know what to do.
I probably shouldn't say.
Huh?
I probably shouldn't.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No? Is that what you do for recovery? Okay.
When you get to be my age, you can use beer as a recovery.
You know what? If you're celebrating sort of like an end of season, go for it. But if you're going to be training the next day or the day after, you just want to make sure that you start a rebuild and recovery. Now, nothing wrong with beer, it can relax you, it's got carbs, but you need to have the protein as well, so that's the time to start the protein. So, anybody else covering?
I like about half an hour after a workout, I have like mix of plain Greek yogurt with natural peanut butter and blueberries, and then probably like another half hour later, like a lot of nuts and trail mix and stuff.
Okay.
It's a lot of fat though.
Yeah, and also not enough carbs. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to re-establish that glycogen, especially if you're still in your training phases. Okay, when you start tapering, it's a little bit different, but when you're still in training phases, you want to make sure your glycogen is operating at capacity all the time. What makes your glycogen capacity? Carbs, okay? So there is a scientific formula that you can work out how many carbs you need based on your body weight. If anybody wants me to help them with that, that's kind of the things that I do. But you get a 3-2, so basically once you've worked out how many carbohydrates you need, in grams, you divide either by 3 or by 4, and that's how much grams of protein you need. Now, a lot of people think they need a lot more protein. So if you think about it, 3-1, carbs to protein, it's still very high on the carb side. So beer's okay, but you need that little bit of grams of protein. So your Greek yogurt is good with the fruit in it, but when you start doing your trail mix and all that afterwards, the fat is okay, but you want to add more carbohydrates to that second meal. And you made a very good point about 30 minutes afterwards. Very good. You want to try to get your recovery meal in within the first 30 minutes. Now the thing is, your hormones are very switcheroo after an intense workout or after a race. What happens is the appetite suppressant hormone is very high after your heart rate's been high. So you're not hungry. You don't feel like eating most of the time. You can probably relate to that. What happens if you don't recover, like you should force yourself to recover, 2 hours later, it's the other way around. Your appetite stimulant hormone suddenly takes over, and suddenly it's like, I can eat the house down, especially if you didn't recover. And again, for those of you that are concerned about your body composition and your leaning phases, if you do not recover right away, you're going to end up gaining weight. Because when the hormones tell your brain, they're neurotransmitters. So what are they doing? They're saying to the brain, eat. I don't care how much you eat, I don't care what you eat, just eat. And you can walk around and eat anything that's not tied down to a table. And remember, at that time, you're also starving because you've just been through an intense workout that used up all your fuel.
You don't necessarily have to eat. You could just if you're can't stomach solid food, I always
you
suggest
drink.
Gatorade.
You just need, exactly. Now this is a good time for that little accelerated effort that came up with the carbs and protein, because now it's got a little bit of protein in it. So again, we are talking about products that I do analysis on my products, but again, it's convenient. Like if you finish a workout and you're going out somewhere and you're not going home and you don't have time to stop in at a restaurant or something and you're just going to go run errands, bring something with you. So that's a good time to bring something like Recover Right or something like that has the right combination. Now again, you paid a lot of money to somebody who's put it together for you, whereas you could make your own protein shake or bring a yogurt in a cooler with. Yeah, chocolate milk. Why do you think chocolate milk's got so much hype these days as the best recovery? Because protein in the milk and solid, quick burning, fill up glycogen carbs in the chocolate. That's the only reason. And because the Dairy Board sponsored the research, because there are lots of things that are good, that are carbs and protein mix. So yes, the Dairy Board sponsored the research, but it doesn't mean to say it's bad. I'm just saying there are lots of things. My personal favorite, I go home, make a protein shake with my whey protein powder and put fruit in it. So your carbs are coming from your fruit, a little bit of protein from your protein powder, ice and water. You can put spinach leaves in for green, to make it green. Yeah.
Okay. There is a reason I did choose those food products after. Within the past year or so, I've been pretty manipulated by some upper level athletes who are getting into the kind of, I don't want to say fad, just because there is a lot of research behind it, but it's new, is that they want to train their, like you were talking about earlier, you would train your body to burn fat by doing these certain workouts, but they're training it by limiting certain types of carbs or gluten or something, but I don't know a whole lot about it. I just talk to some of these guys and kind of do what they do, so I'm not sure like what your take on that
now, you are hitting on a point of the different types of sugars. There's, the maltose and the fructose and the how sugars move through your system. I do have an article, in fact maybe that's the next one you can put in your, I've got an article you can look up, I think it's on the website, it's on my website, it's called Give Me Some Sugar. It does teach you a little bit more about how the different sugars get processed through your body. You've got to be careful of ones that go through the liver, like fructose, because they taste good, so they make your food more appealing, or your drinks or your sports stuff more appealing, but it might tend to have GI distress because it's not going through your system at the right rate. So the way, like I talk about Gatorade because they were the original, came up with a brilliant concept of having the right concentration of carbohydrates, the right type of carbohydrates that makes the drink taste decent. Some people don't like Gatorade as far as the taste, but it tastes okay. It also has the right concentration and the right type of sugars to actually digest through your system to absorb what it needs at the right rate without giving you GI distress. So they leave out fructose because fructose goes through the liver. And what happens there is once the liver is taken away from metabolism, it starts working on other things, and that's when you tend to get GI distress.
If I could just interject one thing on what Carl said.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in the health and fitness industry for almost 20 years now. I can, off the top of my head, probably name 50 diet fads that have come and gone. You know,
yeah, that's going to be.
There's always somebody out there that's trying to come up with a new hook, a new product, something that's going to draw people in and spend their money. You have to be really, really careful between circumstantial pseudoscience and you know, quote unquote clinical studies that are just basically people's opinions versus actual science. And that's why we bring somebody like Ilana in, because she's, you know, she knows the actual science that hasn't been corrupted. You know, they can take any one little study and twist it around and come up with a product. So you've got to be really, really careful because the industry is unregulated. The FDA doesn't regulate supplements. It's kind of a wild west, and there's a lot of fads out there.
And then you brought up a couple, he said a couple of key words there. He said, I'm not sure what the research points out. Don't let any of those other athletes intimidate you. Because do you think it's a domino effect. They've got competitors, and then the next out's got competitors. They've all got competitors. Oh, what's this one doing? What's that one doing? When you read research, you're looking for very specific things. So if you don't know what the research is telling you, go look, be a responsible athlete and look yourself. Instead of thinking, oh, he's intimidating me because he's doing some fad that may be good. Bring it to a sports dietitian and say, hey, what do you think of this? Here's the research. So a couple of points you can look for. Where was that research published? That's very, very important. If it's not in a medical journal and it's not peer reviewed, I wouldn't even look at it twice. The second thing is who sponsored it. Just like I said, the Dairy Board sponsored the research on chocolate milk. Why do you think they did that? Money. It's okay, doesn't mean to say the research is bad, but because they sponsored it, doesn't mean to say it's the only thing out there. Yeah. And the other thing is double-blind studies. I don't know, you know, if you want more research that's empirical, meaning it's scientifically based. Don't look in magazines where you see gorgeous bodies with the six-packs and their heads look totally different. You know, they've been painted on there, and that's usually where you find most of that stuff that, not that you talk about, I'm not trying to single you out there, but I'm just saying that's where you find most of the marketing edges in these sports magazines, where they can Photoshop the advertising, and go look through some of these magazines. It's really a good laugh.
It's not like I'm like an immature athlete not looking through this research.